Folks, we're going to wait just a minute for people to join, and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Riley, and I'm the editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. As you may know, we've been doing Aging in Atlanta events live at various senior living facilities throughout the city and on site at Wellstar Health System campuses for the past several years. Hopefully, we will soon get back to doing these things in person. But in light of what's going on today, and to still stay connected with all of you, we're trying something a little different by having this virtual event on video and in a way that lets you make a little bit of history by doing it this way for the first time. Now, we're going to still feature experts on several topics that matter most to you: health and wellness, managing prescriptions, and of course, money. And while this is a live broadcast, will also be recorded and available on ajc.com/aging. So let's get started. And let me tell you a little bit about how this is going to work. This will be different. There might be a few rough spots. We haven't done this before, but I hope you'll hang in there with us. And you're going to have access to, I think, a lot of really good information. So what we're going to do is we'll have each of our speakers introduce themselves, followed by conversations with each of them for about 8 or 10 minutes on their respective topics of expertise. Afterwards, we'll have time for them to answer some of your questions. We welcome you to submit questions via the comments function on Facebook or YouTube, depending on which channel that you're using. Before we begin, though, I want to thank the sponsors who are graciously populating our panel of experts today.
Kroger is a proud presenting sponsor of the Aging in Atlanta series. Kroger is here for our customers and communities with senior shopping hours, Monday through Thursday from 7 to 8 a.m., and pharmacy hours, which begin at 8 a.m. Monday through Friday. For more information, visit Kroger.com. Wellstar Health System is a proud healthcare sponsor of the Aging in Atlanta series. For more information, visit wellstar.org. And Capital Investment Advisors and Wes Moss are proud sponsors of the Aging in Atlanta series. For more information, visit yourwealth.com.
Okay, now let's get started. Kimberly from Kroger, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly Johnson. I am a pharmacist with Kroger, and today I will be talking about the seasonal allergies that we might be experiencing, how those compare to the coronavirus, and some over-the-counter products we can use.
Thank you, Kimberly. Dr. Barry Mangle, please tell us a little bit about yourself. Dr. Mangle, I think you're on mute. We knew that someone would forget. Go ahead. Now we can hear you just fine.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Barry Mangle. I'm the Chief Cardiology Officer at Wellstar Health System. I'm a practicing cardiologist, interventional cardiologist by training. Been practicing here for the last 26 years.
Thank you, Dr. Mangle. Now, Dr. Rishi Gupta, your turn.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rishi Gupta. I'm the director of the stroke program at Wellstar Health Systems. I've been practicing for 7 years at Wellstar, and I also practice interventional stroke therapies.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. And last but certainly not least, of course, is Wes Moss. Wes, go ahead and introduce yourself. I think everybody knows you anyway, but go ahead.
Hey, everyone. Great to be here. And it would be better in person. I keep thinking that, real life is an A+, and Zoom and FaceTime and Teams. It's like a B+. So it's pretty good. Anyway, I'm so Wes Moss, and I write for the AJC. I've been writing for the AJC for about almost 10 years now. And on WSB Radio, I'm the host of Money Matters on WSB for about, I guess now in the 11th or 12th year. And then I'm the chief investment strategist at an RIA firm, Capital Investment Advisors, and we're right in Sandy Springs. And our client is we call the millionaire next door type client. And I do a lot of work and research around happiness in retirement and writing about the habits of happy retirees versus unhappy retirees. And I've found that you can still be a happy retiree even in quarantine so far. So,
thanks a lot, Wes. All right, great. Now that you've met all our panelists, we're going to begin with some questions for Kimberly Johnson. So, Kimberly, with lots of folks getting exercise outdoors while they're sheltering in place, what are some allergy triggers and what can people do to minimize their allergies?
Right. So seasonal allergens or triggers are things like tree and flower pollen, grasses and weeds. And we also have our year-round allergies like animal dander and dust mites. So obviously the best way to minimize allergies is to avoid the trigger, but there are some things you can do as well. To reduce the amount of pollen that follows you into the house, we try to leave your shoes at the door or in the mudroom, and washing your face and blowing your nose after being outdoors will help remove any dust or pollen as well. For those with pets, they're all shedding their winter coats right now, so that's a lot of extra animal dander around. So it's important to brush them daily if possible, and to dust and vacuum and mop as often as you can. And then we all know that spring cleaning is just a great time to tackle all those hard to reach places to help remove any additional dust and dust mites in the house.
Okay, now here's a question I think a lot of people have, which is, how can I tell if my symptoms are allergies or the coronavirus?
Right. So these allergens can trigger our immune response to release a protective chemical called histamine, which causes our allergy symptoms. And typically those symptoms include itching of the nose, the eyes, the roof of the mouth, a runny, stuffy nose, sneezing, watery, red or swollen eyes, and a dry cough caused by postnasal drip. In comparison, the coronavirus tends to have symptoms of a fever, cough and difficulty breathing, muscle aches, loss of smell or taste, digestive issues, and extreme fatigue. So there is a little overlap with the cough and possibly some shortness of breath or wheezing for patients who have asthma, but any itching or sneezing is typically associated with allergies.
And how about, are there any over-the-counter medications that you recommend for seniors with allergies?
Yes. So the safest over-the-counter medications for older adults are the second-generation antihistamines like Claritin or Zyrtec. These are 24-hour tablets, so they're only taken once a day, and they help against the itchy eyes, ears, and mouth, sneezing, and that postnasal drip. I also like to recommend the steroid nasal sprays like Flonase. The nasal sprays don't have any interactions with prescription medications, and they cover all the same symptoms that Claritin and Zyrtec do. They also help to reduce inflammation in the sinus and nasal passages, which can help with congestion. However, some of these medicated nasal sprays are not recommended if you have glaucoma. And we do try to avoid things like Benadryl and Sudafed, as seniors can be more sensitive to the side effects of those medications.
And how about the options? Can you talk a little bit about the options for not having to contact with anybody when you're accessing prescription medications right now? I mean, we know that so many seniors represent at-risk groups in this coronavirus environment, but they have to still go get their prescriptions. So what would you suggest there?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. So right now, some pharmacies are offering delivery, so you don't even have to make a trip to the store. I know currently that Kroger has a contract with FedEx that has been extended until the middle of May. And most pharmacies also have an option to pay through their phone app or online through your prescription profile. If that just isn't an option for you, I do recommend using the drive-through over going into the store and using debit or credit cards instead of cash. And that's mainly to protect the pharmacy associates and any patients that come after you. I know there's some restrictions with delivery and online payments, so it would be the safest thing to double check with your local pharmacy on that.
Wow, great information, Kimberly. Thank you so much. Now we're going to talk to Dr. Barry Mangle. And so, Dr. Mangle, first question. There's been a concern among medical professionals nationwide that people may not be seeking treatment for heart attacks and strokes because of fears about COVID-19. Talk about why people shouldn't delay care for these kinds of conditions.
Well, sure. One of the things we've been seeing and across the country and at WellStar as well is that there's been a reduction of about 40 to 60% of patients who are coming to the emergency room with acute heart attack or stroke events. And that's a major concern for us because we say that time is muscle when it comes to a heart attack. The longer that you delay treatment, if you're having a heart attack, the more likely it is that you're going to develop complications as a result of your heart attack. And some of those complications can be life-threatening. And so when you're having concerning symptoms, we recommend that you go to the hospital and let the team, the physicians, evaluate you and make sure that it's not a heart attack before really waiting at home. The big problem we're seeing now is a fear about COVID, and people are delaying or even avoiding care. And we're absolutely seeing patients come in days after they're having these events. And again, time is muscle. If you lose heart muscle, it is irreversible. And we really encourage people who are having concerning symptoms not to wait, not to delay care, but rather come and let us evaluate you to avoid some of those irreversible and worrisome complications.
Now, are there any warning signs I can look for, or people can look for before they have a heart attack?
Absolutely. Heart attack symptoms are very variable. We talk about the Hollywood heart attack, having severe chest pain and shortness of breath. That happens, but it's not always the symptoms that people present with, particularly women. Women can have more subtle symptoms. They can have nausea. They can be sweating and not always have chest pain or left arm discomfort. But if you are having those symptoms, if you are having chest discomfort, a heavy feeling in the chest, aching in the left arm or in the back, unusual nausea or shortness of breath or sweating, those could all be signs or symptoms of an acute heart event like a heart attack. Those are the symptoms that we always want people to have evaluated, particularly now because we're, again, getting back to the first point we made, we don't want people to wait at home and risk their lives. So any of those symptoms, whether we're in a pandemic or we're not in a pandemic, we want people to have them evaluated, either calling the doctor or severe symptoms, 911, and go directly to the hospital emergency department.
Now, talk a little bit about how our hearts change with age.
Our hearts, like all of our organs, change with age. Our heart muscle cells, as we age, we lose some of the heart muscle cells through the aging process, just normally. Coronary artery disease, blockage from plaque in your arteries becomes more common as you age. Valvular heart disease, problems with the heart valves, leaking or restricted opening, we call that stenosis, becomes more common as you age as well. And the heart actually can stiffen with age and becomes less compliant. We think of our blood vessels and our heart as being very compliant, but as you get older, the heart can stiffen, and that can lead to problems like shortness of breath or fluid retention. So the heart, like every organ in the body, is going to go through changes as you get older, and symptoms that you develop could be a sign that the heart is not able to compensate for some of those problems. And we can do very well for long periods of time, years, with certain heart conditions. But when you begin to have symptoms, that's telling you that you're not compensating as well anymore. And that's abnormal. Normal heart aging occurs with all of us, but abnormal heart problems, valve problems, coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure can develop with age. So it's important that if you're having changes in the way that you feel, that you report those changes to your doctor, let them know so they can evaluate you.
Now, talk a little bit more about what we can do to keep our hearts healthy.
Well, I like to tell people, know your numbers. And by that, I mean, know what your blood pressure is, know what your cholesterol is, know what your blood sugar is. Obviously, people know what their weight is, but understand how important that is based on what your weight should be. And you can follow what we call your body mass index. It's your height and your weight combined. I joke with patients all the time and say that you can't reduce your body mass index by getting taller as you are older. You can do that when you're younger. You can only lose weight to reduce your body mass index. And that's really, really important. So know your numbers and make sure if your numbers are higher than they should be, meaning your weight is higher, your blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, you attend to those and work with your doctor. They can prescribe medication, they can prescribe diet or exercise plans, and it's extremely important because those are the different things that lead to the diseases that I talked about earlier: coronary artery disease, high blood pressure, and also risk for stroke.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mangle. Now, let's continue our conversation with Dr. Rishi Gupta. So, Dr. Gupta, what are the most common neurological concerns for our senior population?
That's an excellent question. So there are three things that I think we get very concerned about. Is one, memory disorders or conditions where patients complain of memory loss, which we'll talk about. And the other one is movement disorders, such as Parkinson's disease, that does increase in the elderly population. It can put the patients at risk for a fall or issues with their balance, which can be of concern. And lastly, in our world, we're very concerned about stroke. And those patients often, as Dr. Mangle had mentioned earlier, we're particularly concerned in the COVID-19 era of patients not presenting to the emergency room in time with stroke symptoms. And so in the elderly population, conditions such as atherosclerotic disease, which is hardening of the blood vessels, or atrial fibrillation, which is an irregular heart rhythm, does increase in frequency and place elderly patients or older patients at a higher risk for stroke. And so that is of concern to society.
Now, you mentioned strokes. Is there anything that can be done to prevent a stroke? And what are the signs of a stroke? And can you have a second stroke? I mean, talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So the signs of a stroke, there are broad categories for that, but sort of in broad speak, in general terms, absence of movement or difficulty moving half your body, difficulty speaking, a facial droop, loss of vision, and even loss of balance acutely can cause or be symptoms of a stroke. So if those things occur or suddenly occur, we would encourage our patients to call 911 and via ambulance come to the emergency room. They should not wait. As Dr. Mangle mentioned earlier, there are a lot of treatments that need to be rendered in the early phase, which can help patients recover from those symptoms. In terms of can a second stroke occur, the answer is yes. Unfortunately, there is a chance of a second stroke occurring if after the first stroke evaluation, things are missed as to the etiology or the mechanism of the stroke. So what's very important is either prior to a stroke, which is called primary prevention, or after your first stroke, which is secondary prevention. It's very important to work with your physicians to be on the proper treatments and medications. And the big three things that we really harp upon are one, blood pressure control. That's one of the number one risk factors for cause of stroke and heart disease is elevated blood pressure. Two is weight or being overweight and eating healthy, because those can be linked to things such as diabetes and high cholesterol. which are big risk factors for stroke. And I think in particularly as patients get older, one thing that we find is getting maybe under-recognized is atrial fibrillation or an irregular heart rhythm, because those patients can have silent events of irregular heart rhythms. And so it's important to get regular physicals and regular checkups, such as an EKG, so that those things can be hopefully detected ahead of time.
Now, one of the other things that always comes up is just for elderly folks is stability. Is there anything that can be done so that you can better assess risk of falls and prevent them?
Yeah, that's a big issue in particular because one of our concerns is as patients get older, they're placed on more potent blood thinners, such as drugs that are called anticoagulation, especially if they have cardiac issues. And a fall can be catastrophic if they hit their head. They can get a bleed in the brain, which can be fatal or very, very difficult neurologically. So one of the things that's important is the most common cause of falls or problems with balance is actually dizziness. And unfortunately, that is a very vague complaint, which oftentimes clinicians have a difficult time diagnosing the causes of it. But it's important to, number one, look at the medications, because I find many patients are on polypharmacy or on too many medications, and that's actually causing their dizziness and predisposes them to falls. The second is a lot of patients, as they get older, there is a neurologic disconnect between the brain and the heart, and some of the nerves do wear down. So it is important to look for things, what we call orthostatic hypotension, which can cause the blood pressure to drop when someone stands suddenly. So the fix to that is either to wear TED hose or TED stockings, and to also, when you go or change positions, to go slowly. So if you go from standing or sitting to standing, to ensure you wait a few seconds before you start to walk. But it is important to alert your primary care doctor if you're having these issues, because there are assist devices like a cane or a walker or other tools like therapy that can help improve balance.
Now, let's talk about another topic, the signs of dementia. And, we all, as we age, are challenged by loss of memory a little bit. But what's considered normal memory loss as we age?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, I think, for patients to sometimes distinguish, is this normal or am I having signs of Alzheimer's disease? So I think it's important that there are definitely loss of neurons or loss of brain cells as we get older. So it is very common for people to get a little bit forgetful of things such as, where did I leave my keys, or where did I leave something behind? I think what concerns us are when there's a pattern that develops and it's consistently declining. And this is typically noted by family members, not the patient themselves. So what we get concerned about is things such as difficulty balancing a checkbook, difficulty getting lost when someone's driving to a familiar location, difficulty remembering names of loved ones. Those would be very concerning symptoms. And in particular, if a loved one notes that these are progressing or getting worse, the physicians or the clinician team for that patient should be alerted right away.
Rishi, Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question. Does the chance of stroke go up during the quarantine, getting stuck at home, trying to homeschool 4 children at a time?
Oh boy. So stress, it's interesting. I can't speak to quarantine per se and 4 children, but
yeah, but stress is it. My real question was stress. Yeah.
So there's something interesting that I think Dr. Mangle had mentioned earlier, and that was, we're concerned about patients not coming in with stroke and heart attacks, but there is something interesting happening. If patients have COVID-19, there's new data now that's showing that they are at a higher risk for stroke or for vascular clotting disorders. So I think we're watching this story very closely, because there is inflammation that occurs with the virus, and that is leading to clotting and causing strokes. And unfortunately, that's happening in young patients too. But I think quarantine life, we have to be very careful, because people may not be eating as healthy, not exercising. So we do need to be careful to make sure you take care of your physical and mental well-being.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Well, Wes, you jumped in there, and I've got some questions for you, because of course, always money is on our mind, right? So let's just take a hypothetical person, 65, recently retired. Even their well-diversified portfolio is taking a hit here with this COVID-19 market crash. This market and the economy feel worse than we've ever seen. Should that person just sell out and keep their money in cash, or I mean, what should they do? This is unnerving.
Yeah, it is unnerving, and it's kind of a logical response, particularly going into this, knowing how bad, whether you were on the front end of knowing how bad this was, or finally woke up to how bad the economic impact was going to be. Very logical response to say, hey, maybe we just sell and wait till the dark clouds clear. What I think has been interesting and has really helped our folks, our families, we've got about 3,000 families that we work with at our firm. And what's really gotten them through this, I think, are a couple of things. And I kind of point to three really important pieces of the equation. And part of this, too, is getting communication on making sure you understand, how you're invested and the purpose behind the different pieces of how you are invested. But I think a couple of things have helped our families get through this. Even if you go back to March when the storm clouds were even darker than they are today, for the markets at least. Both the stock market was down. At one point, we were down almost 39% for the Dow, which is unnerving. The S&P 500 was close to that. And even some of the safe areas of the market, the bond market, were starting to crack until the Federal Reserve came in and really shored up the credit markets, or the fundamental foundation of the financial system. But the three quick points are: one, we talk about dry powder and making sure that there's enough dry powder to get you through. I'll explain that in a second. Number two, we talk about quality companies that are able to keep paying dividends. And three, looking to recovery. So the first one has to do with this thought of, I think as investors, we tend to think of our portfolios in percentages. Hey, I've got 65% in dividend paying stocks, and I have 35% in cash and CDs, or half in stocks and 50% in safety assets or bonds. And I think that's an important way to look at it. But during this crisis, I've noticed a way to kind of frame that maybe in an even better way for families who have diversification and they're doing all these things right, and they're still nervous. And they say, well, I'm still, the pie itself is shrinking because the market's going down. And one of the ways we've communicated dry powder is, your dry powder is your safety, your fixed income, or your bonds that are meant to be safe and have interest, and cash. Those are the two areas that make up dry powder. But I think of it as really more, that is the money that you can spend and utilize. And instead of saying I've got 30% or 40% in safety assets, I think it's been more helpful to articulate that in terms of time, so that I have 5 years worth of dry powder from a spending perspective, or I have 10 years worth of dry powder from a spending perspective. I think helps people get through these tough markets, rather than, well, it's okay, you've got 40% of your assets that are in safety or cash. I think it's really important to say, well, okay, what does that really mean? Well, it means that if I've got half of my retirement portfolio in safety assets that are really not going to go down, even though the market goes down, and I can say, well, my safety assets or my dry powder is 7 years worth of spending. Do I think the stock side that's reacting to the current crisis, do I think we'll be out of this crisis in 7 years, or 5 years, or 7 years, or 10 years? And the answer for most folks say, yeah, I think absolutely we'll have gone through another crisis by then. And I think framing it in time, Kevin, is really helpful for families to get through this. The second part is that, even though I think that we're going to have permanent changes in this economy, which are in some ways very good changes. I mean, one, Atlanta traffic's going to be better than it's ever been. And it's going to be better than it's ever been because companies like mine and companies all across the country have been forced to do Zoom and work from home. And I think that, again, I think I said earlier that Zoom in-person is an A+, and Zoom is like a B+, and we're on Microsoft Teams, kind of same thing. It's pretty good. But I don't think it replaces human interaction, but it's good enough to say, hey, we're going to probably be working from home 20, 30% virtually at our company, maybe forever. So think about all the massive changes in the economy over the next 5 years. We've almost had this encapsulated, fast forwarded 10 years worth of evolution in the last couple of months of what we've gone through with quarantine. And I think that the economy will change, and the companies maybe that thrive in that economy will change. But still finding companies that are able to pay a steady income stream that have high quality that can get through even really difficult times, that doesn't change for investors. And I think that's another thing that's really helped our families get through this without really having to lose all that much sleep, at least from a financial perspective. And then the last part is that, and I've been talking about this on Money Matters since the very beginning of this crisis. I did my first radio show on COVID-19 on January 5th and 6th. So I've taken this very seriously from the very beginning, is that as bad as this gets and as bad as the economic numbers are, we've already started to see 26 million jobs lost already. And we're going to see a negative GDP print of probably 30% for the second quarter. By the way, the worst quarter in the financial crisis was minus 8%. So, I mean, the recession that we're experiencing right now is much worse than the financial crisis, but it's much more acute and it's much more compressed. We think that will be the case. So, but we have to look towards when we do recover. And
let me jump in there with you.
Yeah.
I mean, you've hinted at recovery and where it may go, but what do you expect to see from the markets? I mean, do you think we've hit bottom and now it's a long climb up, or what are you expecting?
You keep hearing this talk of a W recovery or a V recovery or a U recovery. And I think that in my mind, again, this is just my opinion. I could be absolutely wrong on this, but I think that the market has ignored for at least for a period of time fundamentals and knows that all the economic numbers are bad and knows that earnings are going to be terrible for a quarter. And on average, markets recover at least call it 4 months. Equity markets recover 4 months prior to the recession ending. The same thing actually happened in 2009. Markets started going up 4 months before we were technically out of recession. And then we didn't even know we were in a recession, or the recession had ended, which was June 30th of 08 or 09 until September of 09. And markets were up at that point, but 60%. So you can't wait till the coast is clear to be an investor, or else you've missed a big part of the move. I think I do not believe we will retest the March lows where we were down almost 40%. I do not think we will go there unless the reopening, like we're doing in the state of Georgia, goes so badly that the whole country has to go back into a state of emergency shutdown. Now, I think there'll be pockets of the economy that don't reopen in the right way, and they'll have to shut it back down. But I don't think we're going to have a complete national lockdown once we're open back up. So my opinion is that we don't retest those lows for the market. Doesn't mean we're out of the woods. And I think that I question a little bit that the S&P 500 is down 8 or 9% for the year, which is a massive recovery in the last month and a half. But I don't necessarily think we'll retest the lows unless the virus explodes again.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Wes. Now what we're going to do is spend some time answering some of the questions that our viewers have for our speakers. And the way we're going to do that for all of you is Pam Richards will ask the questions from the audience directly to one of our speakers, to the person who's best to answer. And we think we have time for 4 or 5 questions. So if you haven't submitted one, do so. We've got these experts here and comfortable and on video and ready to share their thoughts. So, Pam, why don't you go ahead and direct the first question to the right person?
All right. Thank you very much, Kevin. Our first question, I believe, is going to line up mostly with you. And it is, what are the best tests to get checked? Is it a stress test? What?
Okay, it sounds like maybe we've lost a little bit of Pam's audio as she's tried to ask those questions. Dr. Mangle, I'm going to guess that question was headed toward you and you heard a little bit of it. So why don't you just run with what you can?
Okay, I think that what I'm hearing is, what is the best test for somebody to check their heart?
Yeah, I
And
think that what probably, everyone hears about all these tests that you can go have. You mentioned
yeah,
EKG and stuff, but I mean, what's the best one in your
well,
view and why? Or
sure. Let me just talk about testing in general. And testing is sort of a snapshot and doesn't really always tell the whole story. So when it comes to, let's talk about coronary artery disease, blockage, I tell my patients all the time that most heart attacks occur in patients who have about a 40 or 50% blockage on the day of their heart attack. Stress tests really don't pick up blockage until we get 70, 80, 90%. So think about that for just a minute. If you had a stress test on the day that you were going to have a heart attack before you had it, you may not pick it up because that 40 or 50% blockage that sort of fractures or cracks, we form a blood clot, it blocks the artery. The stress test really wouldn't pick that up. It wouldn't tell us a whole lot about what was going to happen. But if you had a 70 or 80 or 90% blockage, yes, we would probably pick that up. So stress testing is good when you have symptoms and we're trying to look to see if those symptoms are caused by significant buildup of plaque in your arteries, blocking the arteries. Another good test that we talk about for screening is a CT scan called a CT calcium study. And that allows us, in patients who are asymptomatic, don't have any symptoms at all, to get an idea of whether you're starting to build plaque in your arteries. And why would we want to know that? Well, we want to know it because we can get at that problem earlier. We can start medication to be sure your cholesterol is lower. We can look for diabetes. We would be very aggressive in that scenario, trying to lower your risk once we knew a little bit more about where you are. So 2 different kinds of tests for 2 different reasons.
okay, thank you, doctor. I'm told Pam's back and she's ready to ask some more questions. So take it away, Pam. We'll see if it goes better this time.
All right, let's again. Our next question is for Dr. Gupta. Both of my parents are strokes hereditary that I need to be watching out for now?
So I think the question was, are strokes hereditary? The answer to that is most strokes are not hereditary. There are certain conditions such as carotid disease, which we do see that do run in families. And the reason for that actually comes back down to one component of that, which is hypercholesterolemia or high cholesterol. That definitely can run in families and it has a genetic link. And having that risk factor can predispose you to higher risk of stroke and heart disease. So that is one thing to ensure with your primary care physician, to have your cholesterol checked. The other one is atrial fibrillation, can be hereditary also. So if you have a relative or a first-degree relative with atrial fibrillation, it's important to inform your physician as they can monitor you for that condition.
Thank you very much. Let's hope. Can you hear me now, Kevin?
We're hearing you pretty well, Pam, so keep going.
All right. Thank you very much. So this would be a question for both of the doctors, but is it important fresh air while we are quarantined? And in addition to that, too much rest during this time?
Okay, I think you guys heard most of that. I'll throw it at Dr. Gupta to start, and then when he finishes up, Dr. Mangle, you jump in. But the question seems to be, if we're sneaking outside to get fresh air, is that okay? I mean, is that what we should be doing? Is that crucial? And all this rest we're getting, are there perils to that by, having that couch so nearby during the day? Go ahead, Dr. Gupta.
Sure. I think that's an excellent question. So I think this goes back to the concept of exercise and being active. So I know we're all being asked to shelter in place or stay at home. And I think if you're going to go outside, obviously the social distance rules still apply. But I do think it's important to have some activity. And my concern is that we're going to see a surge of some other ramifications of people being sedentary at home. And I am concerned about a delayed effect in a couple months of people eating unhealthy, stress, gaining weight, and being inactive. So I do think it's important, going for a walk, going for a jog, whatever your appropriate level of exercise would be. I do think that's an important thing to do during this time.
And how about you there, Dr. Mrengel, on the question of how much rest is too much rest?
I would say that our bodies are meant to move. We're really meant to move around, and that's important. So sitting at home on the couch, probably not a great idea. It's not great for weight problems. You'll find that you gain weight if you're sitting and not moving around. It's also not a good thing from a biomechanical perspective. Just really staying in one place can lead to all sorts of other problems. So I'm encouraging my patients to be active, continue to eat healthy, and make sure that while you're at home, you're not ordering a lot of foods that you wouldn't be eating otherwise, particularly patients who have underlying heart conditions. And I think it's a great idea to get outside and get some fresh air, walk around. Again, I think social distancing is always going to be important, at least until this is very much in our rearview mirror. But I encourage people to move around and get outside and just do it safely.
So if I understand both of you, you're saying, look, you may be sheltering in place, but eating right and exercising are still important, and COVID-19 doesn't give you an excuse to avoid that.
That's
okay,
correct.
Thanks. How about this one's for Kimberly? Pam's getting me the questions here now until we can get her audio working the way it should. What's the best way to dispose of old medicine? Very practical question, Kimberly.
Yeah, and that's a great question. So there are several ways to dispose of medications. Usually you can actually Google medication drop-off locations. I just recently did that here in Atlanta, and there are a couple of police departments and a couple of Walgreens in the Atlanta area that have boxes that almost look like the post office box that you can just drop your medications in. There's also a biannual DEA drug take-back event. We were supposed to host one in April that was canceled because of COVID-19, but it should be coming back in October. And there'll be different locations throughout Atlanta that you can just bring in all of your old expired medications, your old over-the-counter products, even anything that has a needle or a sharp on it will be accepted at those events. We don't ask any questions. You just bring them up at your own convenience, drop them off, and off you go. We do not recommend disposing of any medications in the sink or down the toilet. We really do want to refrain from doing that at all.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kimberly. That's good advice. Wes, we've got one for you here, and it's a simple one. Probably not a simple answer. What about investing in real estate during this time?
Well, I think that over time, particularly when our confidence comes back. So real estate is a long-term purchase. It's a big decision whether you're going to be a landlord and rent a place out, or you're going to you're looking for a primary home for your family or a vacation property. And it's a long-term asset that's arguably the biggest asset and the biggest expenditure for most families in America. And you've got to have confidence to be able to do it. And I can just tell you that right now, the confidence of American consumers, right, is pretty shaken. And I think that I would also point back to trying to look beyond the valley of how rough the economic times are today, and all the economic headlines that are going to continue to be rough for a while, but it doesn't mean they're going to stay rough. So if I go out to this fall, and particularly the beginning of next year, I think you're going to see an economy that is not back up and running fully, but very much up and running. And I think I think you're going to see a pretty significant dip in real estate prices. Real estate, you don't see it on headlines every single day. I mean, we see the Dow's up or down 500 points a day. You don't see the value of your home drop by $5,000 or $10,000 in a given week. But I think during this period of time, we're certainly going to see a dip in prices. And I think if people have the confidence that this economy is going to be in a good place, I think real estate is still an amazingly good long-term asset, particularly the primary home. And I just commenting to making this comment the other day is that all of a sudden, if you look at think about the apartment REITs, think about the apartment market that is still actually a really popular and probably a good place from a real estate perspective to look at over the next 5 to 10 years. All those apartment REITs just now turned into all those apartment REITs we know of just turned into office REITs as well, because all of America now is learning to work out of their home. So now you have apartments that are now not just apartments, but they're also home offices as well. So I think there's a bright future in the apartment rental area as well.
Okay, thanks, Wes. Dr. Mengel, one for you. What's an acceptable body mass index, that BMI that you talked about? And the question's like, what's acceptable, not necessarily what's great.
Well, we really try to aim for a body mass index of about 25.
Is that pre-COVID or prior? Is that
yeah. So explain that 25 in some detail. I mean, the formula, and just for those of us.
It's basically a height and weight formula, and we're trying to determine, based on your height, what's an appropriate weight for you. And it's probably a little oversimplified, but anything in the 23 to 25 range is considered optimal. Once you go 25 to 30, you're overweight. 30 to 35, we consider obesity class 1. 35 to 40 is class 2, and then above that is morbid obesity. So those are the goals. And again, I say it's imperfect because all of our body structures are different. Some people have a lot of muscle, and so therefore they may weigh more. But it's a pretty good estimate of where you should be aiming for. And again, about 25 is a good number.
Okay, thank you. Another question really quickly, and then I have one that any one of you can answer. But on this one, Dr. Mengel specifically, you hear all this different news about whether you take an aspirin every day. I mean, what's your view on that?
So there's been a lot of recent research about aspirin, and a lot of it has disproven what we used to think about primary prevention. So we break this down into primary prevention, which means, as Dr. Gupta was saying, before you've had an event, and then secondary prevention, which is after you've already had an event. Secondary prevention really still includes aspirin. Most of the recent changes are on the primary prevention side. And what we found is that people who may have some risk factors, but haven't yet had an event, heart attack, a stroke, things like that, many of them are not good candidates for aspirin because there's bleeding risk associated with taking aspirin. And so we've changed a lot of our recommendations around that. I always recommend you talk to your doctor because there are nuances there. One of them I talked about earlier is if you have a calcium study, a CT calcium study, and you have a very high calcium score indicating that you have a lot of plaque in your arteries, your doctor might feel differently about putting you on aspirin in a situation like that. So you still have to understand what your individual risk is, but a lot of this has changed over time, and we're not prescribing aspirin anywhere near as often as we used to, based on the recent trials over the last few years.
Okay, so this next question, it might be the last question, because I want to ask each of you to answer it, and I'll call on you, but I'll state the question so that you can know what it is, and then think about your answer. Your advice, whether personal or professional, on just mental health during this time when we're sheltering in place and all this stuff is going on. So I'm going to start with you, Wes, and then we'll go around to the medical professionals on it. But I mean, what are you doing to keep yourself sane?
Well, I'm on a very thin edge, Kevin. Just trying.
We were worried about that. We were
trying
worried.
to hold it together. And listen, I'm fortunate because I've got 4 young kids that are constantly running around the house. So it doesn't feel like Groundhog Day. I hear that a lot, but I will say that, and my wife is here, and so we've got dogs, and thank God bless my dog, by the way, which is I've never loved my dogs more than this quarantine life, because they've forced me to get out of the house every single day, at least once, if not twice, every single day, because they will not rest until they are walked. And I'm on Zoom all the time, and I'm on Teams, so they can't be barking at my door. So that's been really wonderful. And I think that's an important thought here, is that a lot of our clients are, let's say they're in their 60s or let's say 70s, and they don't have a bunch of little kids running around, and they can't even see their grandkids. And it's a really it's a sad, disconnected time. And we all know there's been so much research around isolation and how unbelievably unhealthy it is. It's very clear that socialization and interconnectedness is a essential component for happy retiree. And here we are almost forced to be away, apart from each other. So it's just hard. I think it's just really hard. And if you're not living with somebody right now and you're all alone, I think the only answer right now is that I guess there's a reason, that adoption of puppies has gone through the roof in America, because it's a great time to have a pet. I think, number one, whether you're a dog person or a cat person, either way, having some company is great. I think that every single thing humanly possible you can do, whether it's talk to your neighbors. I'm lucky enough to be able to go out and play golf, and that's been supposedly a relatively safe thing, as long as you're not, in a cart with somebody. So I think I have to have some sort of socialization. Online video chat doesn't do it for me. Again, it's a B+. It's pretty good, but it's not like human interconnectedness. So anything you could possibly do, and I think that there's still varying opinions on social distancing. Is it safe to sit around and chit chat with your neighbors, or have a drink have a glass of wine in the driveway socially distanced? I think it is, because I think the mental health side of it is dramatically important, and I'm an advocate for that, as long as we're doing it safely.
Okay, thanks for that, Wes. Kimberly Johnson, I mean, what's your advice, personal or professional, during this time to keep yourself mentally healthy?
So I'm in the opposite end as Wes. I don't have any kids. I don't have any pets. So it is very much just myself. And I definitely felt the isolation in the very beginning of this shelter in place. So the 2 things that I really had to focus on is limiting the amount of news that I was letting come into my life. So I was checking those numbers on the Georgia Department of Health page, every day at 12 and 7, and that really can focus on the negative. And so what I would recommend is just, acknowledge the news, get the news in, because it is important to stay up to date, but try to limit that so it's not the only thing that you are watching or reading every day. And the second thing is, since we can't physically meet with friends or family, is just make sure you're calling and checking in on each other. Just having a 15, 20-minute phone call can just brighten up the entire day. So that's definitely what I would recommend.
Okay, Kimberly. Now, I know when you said limiting news, you're still reading the Atlanta Journal-Constitution every single day, and notice that we've put new puzzles, and we're covering a lot of stuff that isn't just COVID-19 news. I know that was just a slight oversight, so I would mention that.
That is one of the articles that I check every day.
Thank you. Dr. Gupta, what about you?
So I am very concerned about the mental well-being of society in general. And I don't like the term social distancing, because I think it should be called physical distancing and not social distancing, because I think one of the challenges is what we're trying to encourage people to do is stay 6 feet away from sort of the breathing and the aerosol. But that does not mean you can't socialize in other creative manners. And And I think I love Wes's idea of pets. I think pets are a wonderful way of helping with, that sort of having someone there if you live alone. But I do think there are clever ways of connecting with other people. And I think, like, for me, it's been amazing. My old college friends, like, everybody's reaching out, people I haven't heard from in a long time. I do think there's a swell of outreach out there. And I think it's important to try to make those connections again and use that opportunity to perhaps re-engage in people that have dropped off in your life. Secondly, I really think one of the biggest things about mental health is exercise is a big component. So I think if you don't integrate some sort of activity in your life, I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where our brains are really not wired to be sitting around on the couch all day. And I do think negative, pessimistic news cycles can definitely weigh heavily on people. There's been a lot written about people are not sleeping well. There's almost this post-traumatic stress type sleep patterns people are going through. So I do think there's a sort of vicious cycle of poor sleep, feeling down, feeling isolated. And I think activity, getting the endorphins going and connecting with new people through social media, however you do it. But I think we should use the word physical distancing and encourage socialization in other ways.
Rishi, I love that, by the way. I have not heard anybody use that, and it makes me feel a lot less guilty talking to someone, because you're right. It's like social distance. Well, no. It's really just physical. But it's a really good point. I'm going to call the White House actually on that one. I'd love for Fauci to start using that, but that's a really good advice.
Good luck with that, Wes. How about you, Dr. Mangle? Personal and professional mental health. What do you think?
Well, a couple important points. We're definitely seeing increased suicidality. We're seeing increased suicides, and so particularly among healthcare professionals. And so, from my perspective, we're reaching out to one another, just checking in, making sure that people are doing okay. We've got a lot of colleagues on the front lines, and it's very stressful right now for them taking care of these very ill patients without family support and things like that. And so we have a very strong network of physicians, and WellStar has done some amazing things to be sure there's a support system for providers. On a more personal note, exercise, I think, is great. And as Dr. Gupta said, I've personally reconnected with some of my closest friends. We do a Zoom cocktail hour once a week now, and these are people that you just don't touch base with all the time. I think it's wonderful to be able to do that. So social connections, staying physically active, making sure that we understand that people might be at higher risk now for mental health issues, depression, anxiety, checking in with people, making sure they're doing okay. This is very, very important.
Okay, thanks. Now what we're going to do, we're getting close to the end of our time here. I can't believe already that we are, but I'm going to ask each of our panelists just for a final thought before we finish up. And I'm gonna start with Kimberly Johnson. Why don't you go ahead with some final thoughts, and then we'll work our way around the panel.
Okay. So last but not least, just make sure that you continue to wash your hands, especially to help wash off all of that dust and pollen. If you are going outdoors, it'll help with those seasonal allergies you're experiencing. And it's just been awesome being able to work with you guys today with this team's meeting to get this Aging in Atlanta event going. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Kimberly. Dr. Mangle, what are your final thoughts from you?
One of the things I'd say is that, and I've been asked this frequently, is what good has come out of this entire COVID crisis? And one of the things I've found is the ability to do virtual healthcare for our patients, I think, is a real positive for some of our elderly patients. So I think that's here to stay in many different ways. And I think we've learned a lot about being able to take care of patients in a pandemic. We've really increased the pace of therapeutics, of testing. And so I think we've learned a lot. And hopefully, if we ever get into another crisis, we will be able to move more rapidly And so I think those are some positive things that probably have come out of all this as we look ahead, and hopefully we can avoid this again in the future.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mangle. How about you, Dr. Gupta?
So I think the one thing is, I know a lot of people are scared, and there's a lot of pessimism around this whole pandemic. I think it's important to have a message of hope and optimism that, I think what Dr. Mangle and Wes said are two things that I think are extremely important. We've learned quite a bit from this. And for me in particular, there's been so much written about the discrepancies of healthcare with rural and metropolitan areas. And I think those barriers are being broken down by this whole pandemic. I think we're finding efficient, effective ways to deliver healthcare in an egalitarian system that I've never seen this before. So, I've been very impressed at how quickly and rapidly we're being able to do things. And I think that should bring some optimism for the community at large, that innovation and technology is coming at a rapid pace, and we will be able to do things that we've never been able to do before.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gupta. How about you, Wes?
Yeah, I think I'll just maybe echo what my fellow panelists have been saying, and that is, I'm really optimistic about. I know it's been a really tough period of time for a lot of families, particularly in the cities that are hardest hit. And it's hard for some areas to even understand how bad it's been in other areas because some places have been unaffected. But just in general, I think I've already started to see real shifts in an evolution in this economy, literally like a fast forwarding of 10 years. I think about the CEO of the Mayo Clinic a couple of weeks ago saying that they used to do on average 50 appointments telemedicine a day, and now they're up to 2,000 a day. Just talk about rapid evolution of something that can help so many people. That's a game-changing thing for our healthcare system and our economy. And I know we're out of this thing in as far as, I think that there's obviously controversy and a lot of opinions on whether we reopen or not. And my opinion on this, and I'll leave you with this, my thought about reopening, let's say, is maybe an optimistic one, because I think it's less about when we reopen and how smart we are about reopening. And if we collectively understand all the things we've learned and been forced to learn in the last couple of months that we take seriously now from a public health perspective that we didn't before. So I think we're forever better. If you can just look out 3 to 6 months from here, I think we're a much better nation. And as long as we can get through that in an optimistic light, I think we're going to be in great shape.
Thanks, Wes, and thanks everybody. We're at the end now, and in closing, we want to once again thank all the panelists. Thank you for being here. We want to also thank the sponsors whose support made today's program possible: Kroger, Wellstar Health System, and Capital Investment Advisors. We would also like to recognize the other sponsors who support Aging in Atlanta throughout the year. Be sure to visit ajc.com/aging for updates on the topics we hear from you that mean the most. And there will be a recorded broadcast of today's event. In addition, the AJC is publishing 3 more Aging in Atlanta sections in May, starting with this Sunday, May 3rd. Thank you all for attending. Please continue to stay safe, healthy, and connected.
Thanks, everyone.